for groceries for a lot. And so we're going to be charging a discounted reciprocal tariff of 34%. I think, in other words, they charge us, we charge them less. So how can anybody be upset? They will be, because we never charge anybody anything. But now we're going to charge. European Union, they're very tough, very, very tough traders. You know, you think of European Union, very friendly. They rip us off. It's so sad to see.
It was nearly an hour long, and that chart, ladies and gentlemen, is exactly how the entire world learned about what the tariff rate would be. And I will tell you, so my wife is a trade expert. We were sitting on the couch, we were watching this together, and we both audibly gasped whenever we saw what it actually was. And let's go ahead and put this up there on the screen. It is the craziest thing. Okay, let me take the hyperbole out of it. This is the most extraordinary tariff action in over a century, probably the single most economically impactful action that a president of the United States has ever made in terms of direct intervention into the economy. So there you have these, quote, U.S. discounted reciprocal trade tariffs that are there on the right, 34% for China, 20% on the European Union, 46% for Vietnam, 32% on Taiwan. Just a side note, Taiwan is listed there as a country, so that's interesting in and of itself. 24% there for Japan, 26% on India, 25% on South Korea, 36% on Thailand, 31% Switzerland. A lot of this is listed as either major U.S. trading partners and or the amount of bilateral trade that we do each year. Now, I want everybody to pay attention to the way that the column is designed. It says tariffs charged to the USA, including currency manipulation and trade barriers. So there was immediate discussion of how did they actually find this, how did they come to this list, not only of countries, but actually of the rate themselves. All indications right now is that they literally used either ChatGPT or some Wikipedia form to find the number of countries in the world. A perfect example, let's put this up there on the screen. One of the islands that was listed is the Heard and McDonald's Islands. It's inhabited only by penguins. Yes, it is part of Australia, so they could have just said Australia.
They're ripping us off, Saagar.
Yes, the Svalbard, which is, what is it? The highest northern place that's populated by humans, I believe. So that is included. Guinea-Bissau. Now, you'll notice the overall regime basically works this way. The tariff is calculated based upon some of this, I'll call it extraordinary math for now. That extraordinary math comes to a figure, which they, for example, like in the China case, where they come up with this number of some 67%, that number is then divided by 2 because Trump says that we're going to be kind, and that is the, quote, discounted reciprocal tariff that is being placed on these other countries. Now, in the case where we do actually have a trade surplus, the baseline assumption is that that trade surplus is still being impacted by non-trade barriers and or things like currency manipulation, so a baseline of 10%. Now, the reason why that is so extraordinary is that if you'll remember, even during the campaign, Trump had discussed, a 10 or a 20% tariff that would be put into place. That actually would have been less than where we are right now. So let me just go ahead and show you guys, for example, what the current actual tariff is overall. Let's go ahead and put, what is it, A6, please, up on the screen. A6 can show you that the current tariff regime, which previously was roughly around 1.5%, is now, quote, off the scale of the graph that we are even showing you. Now, the way that they arrived at this math, as I said, and you really need to buckle in because this is kind of nerdy, but let's go ahead and put A7, please, on the screen. Immediately, people were like, where the hell did this come from? James Surowiecki says this, quote, just figured out where these fake tariff rates come from. They didn't actually calculate tariff rates plus non-tariff barriers as they said they did. Instead, for every country, they just took our trade deficit with that country and divided it by the country's exports to the United States. So, for example, we have a 17.9 billion trade deficit with Indonesia. Its exports to us are 28 billion. 17.9 over 28 equals 64, which Trump claims is the tariff rate Indonesia charges us. Now, let me just briefly explain also why that doesn't make a hell of a lot of sense. The idea behind this this is that the trade deficit itself, divided by the number of goods, is somehow an approximation for what a reciprocal tariff is. That is just simply not true. For example, the entire way that this is being sold is, and I wouldn't even blame people if it says reciprocal tariff, for people to say, for example, oh my God, Vietnam charges the United States a 90% tariffs on goods. That's completely not true. Actually, Vietnam just yesterday said that they were going to take all reciprocal tariffs away. This is a baseline assumption that the mere existence of a trade deficit with any country in the world, not just China, Japan, South Korea, the manufacturing powerhouses, Mexico or Canada, which are exempt from this, just by the way. Those are currently still under USMCA standards. That assumption there is that the trade deficit, the mere existence, is one which is against the United States and requires a corrective action known and being classified as a reciprocal tariff. It is not a reciprocal tariff. In fact, it does not even include currency manipulation. There is a case to be made that it is the way that you could roughly approximate it. For China, maybe. We can talk about that a little bit later. But in the interim, what we can tell you is that there is no way to describe this as, like, even saying extraordinary does not capture it.
Yeah.
We are talking about a 54% tariff on China because these tariffs will stack on top of the 301 tariffs that have already been put in place. That's 54% on one of the largest trading partners, I think number 3, for the entire United States of America, not to mention consumer electronics, consumer goods, etc. Vietnam is our number 8 trading partner. The vast majority of retail goods in the textile industry enter the United States from Vietnam. The other issue that we really see here is that none of this is paired with any tax credits and or capital injection. The rough estimate off the top as of this morning is that this will impact roughly $400 billion worth of goods in the United States, an additional $400 billion. That's what the overall revenue that would raise. You would then have to see a corrective action of roughly, I mean, that's almost what, half of the original TARP bill going back to 2008 to offset. Now, in the immediate term, what's going to happen is that you are watching a significant amount of these goods that are going to effectively be tariffed at these crazy rates starting tomorrow and next week. Tomorrow and next week is when all of this stuff starts to go into place. As all of that goes into place, the absolute massive shock to the supply chain is going to be extraordinary. Now, the current market reaction, guys, let's go ahead and put that up there. As you guys can see, it's roughly around 3.3% as the S&P 500 right now. The NASDAQ futures down by about 3.84%, etc. The Secretary of the Treasury was pressed immediately after the press conference in the White House, being asked, what can other countries do? What exactly does this all mean? Here's what he had to say. Guys, let's go ahead and play A5.
It was a big day. The president calls it Liberation Day. You know, we showed the markets before, but if you saw the post-market reaction, it was kind of down across the board. You know, people are looking at their 401ks, and they worry about it. What do you say to them tonight?
Brett, I say that what we are doing is we're setting the stage for long-term economic growth, that we were on our way to a financial crisis. You know, I used to teach a history of financial crises, and with that gigantic government spending, it was unsustainable. You look back in 1998, you look back in 07, right before it looked great, everything collapsed.
China is at 34%, added to the 20% already, so that's 54% on Chinese goods.
Yes.
Are they going to come back with something big?
Well, we'll see what they do. Is my advice to every country right now is do not retaliate, sit back, take it in, let's see how it goes, because if you retaliate, there will be escalation. If you don't retaliate, this is the high watermark. And I'm trying to be Secretary of Treasury, not a market commentator. What I would point out is that especially the NASDAQ peaked on Deep Seek Day. So that's a Mag 7 problem, not a MAGA problem. They don't like tariffs, then why do they have them?
And should we view these as permanent?
That, you know, I think we're going to wait and see how this plays out.
Not inspiring at all. No clear instructions there for other countries. And that is one actually where it makes the least amount of sense, because you had two countries, Vietnam and Israel, both before, who were like, okay, no reciprocal tariff, no worries. And then, of course, they still get hit with the reciprocal immediately. And they were trying to figure, they're like, what are you talking about? You know, we just said that we won't have reciprocal tariffs. This is one where you basically are putting people in a situation where you don't have any clear instructions for how